What is the richest country in the world? Welcome to Hamster NBC, the premier children's news channel with humor and easy-to-understand explanations. With you, Pez the hamster and Mark the royal corgi. And now, after each episode, you'll hear popular fairy tales. Today, we're asking a question that sounds simple, but actually hides a big secret. Which country do you think is the richest in the world? The one with the most money, the tallest buildings, and the biggest cars? Or is it a little more complicated? Pears immediately points out that wealth isn't just about coins and bills. Mark listens attentively and adds that sometimes the most important things can't be put in a wallet. When adults say rich country, they often mean money, how much a country earns, how much it spends, and how much it can afford. But money is only one way to measure wealth, and not always the most important one. There are countries where people earn a lot, but have little rest. There are countries where there's not much money, but plenty of parks, smiles, and free time. Mark is surprised and says it as like choosing between a big cake and the time to eat it in peace. Pez nods and says that wealth comes in different forms. Some countries are rich in nature. They have forests, rivers, mountains, and clean air. People there can walk, breathe, and feel at peace. Other countries are rich in knowledge. They have many schools, libraries, and scientists. Their greatest treasure is their minds and ideas. And then there are countries rich in opportunity. There, every child can dream, study, and choose their own path. Pears pauses and asks, "What would you choose?" Mark replies that he would like to live somewhere where he can be himself and not be afraid of making mistakes. Sometimes countries with a high standard of living are considered the richest. There, people live long lives, rarely get sick, and feel safe. But even in such countries, not everything is perfect. Wealth doesn't mean there are no problems at all. Pears reminds us that money can help, but it can't replace friendship, kindness, and care. Mark agrees, saying that the most valuable things can't be bought. And here's where the intrigue begins, because if you ask different people, they will name different countries as the richest. Some will say it's a country with big cities and skyscrapers. Others will choose a country with plenty of nature and peace. And still others will think twice and say that the richest country is one where people help each other. Pears smiles and says that perhaps wealth isn't a place on the map. Mark adds that perhaps it begins within. Today, we won't name a single country as the rich, because wealth comes in many forms, and everyone sees it differently. And that's what makes our world interesting. This was an episode of Hamster NBC about wealth that can't be measured in a single number. And now the day is gradually drawing to a close. The light softens, towards slow, and a special bedtime story awaits us. But that's a whole other part of our journey. If you're listening to us tonight, make yourself comfortable. A long-awaited bedtime story awaits you very soon, calm and warm, to help you end the day. And now the day is slowly drawing to a close. The noise grows quieter. Thoughts slow down. And it's time for storytelling. But before we begin, let's do one small but important thing. If you enjoy learning new things, if you enjoy listening to stories before bed, and if you want to come back again, subscribe to the Hamster NBC channel and like this video. This way, you'll help us create even more kind stories and clear explanations for children all over the world. Now, get comfortable. History is waiting for you. The fourth voyage, Sinbad. The sailor, the pleasures which I enjoyed after my third voyage had not charms sufficient to divert me from another. My passion for trade and my love of novelty again prevailed. I therefore settled my affairs, and having provided a stock of goods fit for the traffic I designed to engage in, I set out on my journey. I took the route of Persia, traveled over several provinces, and then arrived at a port, where I embarked. We hoisted our sails and touched at several ports of the continent, and then put out to sea, when we were overtaken by such a sudden gust of wind as obliged the captain to lower his yards and take all other necessary precautions to prevent the danger that threatened us. But all was in vain. Our endeavors had no effect. The sails were split in 1,000 pieces, and the ship was stranded. Several of the merchants and seamen were drowned, and the cargo was lost. I had the good fortune, with several of the merchants and mariners, to get upon some planks, and we were carried by the current to an island which lay before us. There we found fruit and spring water, which preserved our lives. We stayed all night near the place where we had been cast ashore, and next morning, as soon as the sun was up, advancing into the island, saw some houses which we approached. As soon as we drew near, we were encompassed by a great number of Negroes, who seized us and carried us to their respective habitations. I and 5 of my comrades were carried to one place. Here they made us sit down, and gave us a certain herb, which they made signs to us to eat. My comrades, not taking notice that the blacks ate none of it themselves, thought only of satisfying their hunger, and ate with greediness. But I, suspecting some trick, would not so much as taste it, which happened well for me, for in a little time after I perceived my companions had lost their senses, and that when they spoke to me, they knew not what they said. The Negroes fed us afterward with rice, prepared with oil of coconuts, and my comrades, who had lost their reason, ate of it greedily. I also partook of it, but very sparingly. They gave us that herb at first, on purpose, to deprive us of our senses, that we might not be aware of the sad destiny prepared for us, and they supplied us with rice to fatten us. For, being cannibals, their design was to eat us as soon as we grew fat. This accordingly happened, for they devoured my comrades, who were not sensible of their condition. But my senses being entire, you may easily guess that instead of growing fat, I grew leaner every day. The fear of death under which I labored caused me to fall into a languishing which proved my safety for the Negroes, having eaten my companions, seeing me to be withered and sick, deferred my death. Meanwhile, I had much liberty, so that scarcely any notice was taken of what I did, and this gave me an opportunity one day to get at a distance from the houses and to make my escape. An old man, who saw me and suspected my design, called to me as loud as he could to return, but I redoubled my speed and quickly got out of sight. At that time there was none but the old man about the houses, the rest being abroad, and not to return till night, which was usual with them. Therefore, being sure that they could not arrive in time enough to pursue me, I went on till night, when I stopped to rest a little, and to eat some of the provisions I had secured, but I speedily set forward again, and traveled 7 days, avoiding those places which seemed to be inhabited, and lived, for the most part, upon coconuts, which served me both for meat and drink. On the 8th day I came near the sea, and saw some white people like myself, gathering pepper, of which there was great plenty in that place. This I took to be a good omen, and went to them without any scruple. They came to meet me as soon as they saw me, and asked me in Arabic who I was, and whence I came. I was overjoyed to hear them speak in my own language, and satisfied their curiosity by giving them an account of my shipwreck, and how I fell into the hands of the Negroes. "Those Negroes," replied they, "eat men. And by what miracle did you escape their cruelty?" I related to them the circumstances I have just mentioned, at which they were wonderfully surprised. I stayed with them till they had gathered their quantity of pepper, and then sailed with them to the island from whence they had come. They presented me to their king, who was a good prince. He had the patience to hear the relation of my adventures, and he afterward gave me clothes, and commanded care to be taken of me. The island was very well peopled, plentiful in everything, and the capital a place of great trade. This agreeable retreat was very comfortable to me after my misfortunes, and the kindness of this generous prince completed my satisfaction. In a word, there was not a person more in favor with him than myself, and consequently every man in court and city sought to oblige me, so that, in a very little time I was looked upon rather as a native than a stranger. I observed one thing which to me appeared very extraordinary. All the people, the king himself not excepted, rode their horses without bridle or stirrups. This made me one day take the liberty to ask the king how it came to pass. His Majesty answered that I talked to him of things which nobody knew the use of in his dominions. I went immediately to a workman and gave him a model for making the stock of a saddle. When that was done, I covered it myself with velvet and leather, and embroidered it with gold. I afterward went to a smith, who made me a bit, according to the pattern I showed him, and also some stirrups. When I had all things completed, I presented them to the king, and put them upon one of his horses. His Majesty mounted immediately, and was so pleased with them that he testified his satisfaction by large presents. As I paid my court very constantly to the king, he said to me one day, "Sinbad, I love thee, and I have one thing to demand of thee, which thou must grant." "Sir," answered I, "there is nothing but I will do, as a mark of my obedience to your Majesty." "I have a mind thou shouldst marry," replied he, "that so thou mayest stay in my dominions, and think no more of thy own country." I durst not resist the prince's will, and he gave me one of the ladies of his court, noble, beautiful, and rich. The ceremonies of marriage being over, I went and dwelt with my wife, and for some time we lived together in perfect harmony. I was not, however, satisfied with my banishment, therefore designed to make my escape the first opportunity, and to return to Baghdad. At this time the wife of one of my neighbors fell sick and died. I went to see and comfort him in his affliction, and finding him absorbed in sorrow, I said to him as soon as I saw him, "God preserve you and grant you a long life." "Alas," replied he, "how do you think I should obtain the favor you wish me? I have not above an hour to live." "Pray," said I, "do not entertain such a melancholy thought. I hope I shall enjoy your company many years." "I wish you," he replied, "a long life, but my days are at an end, for I must be buried this day with my wife. This is a law which our ancestors established in this island, and it is always observed. The living husband is interred with the dead wife, and the living wife with the dead husband. Nothing can save me. Everyone must submit to this law." While he was giving me an account of this barbarous custom, the very relation of which chilled my blood, his kindred, friends, and neighbors came in a body to assist at the funeral. They dressed the corpse of the woman in her richest apparel, and all her jewels, as if it had been her wedding day. Then they placed her in an open coffin, and began their march to the place of burial, the husband walking at the head of the company. They proceeded to a high mountain, and when they had reached the place of their destination, they took up a large stone, which covered the mouth of a deep pit, and let down the corpse with all its apparel and jewels. Then the husband, embracing his kindred and friends, suffered himself, without resistance, to be put into another open coffin with a pot of water and 7 small loaves, and was let down in the same manner. The ceremony being over, the aperture was again covered with the stone, and the company returned. It is needless for me to tell you that I was a melancholy spectator of this funeral, while the rest were scarcely moved. The custom was to them so familiar. I could not forbear communicating to the king my sentiment respecting the practice. "Sir," I said, "I cannot but feel astonished at the strange usage observed in this country of burying the living with the dead. I have been a great traveler and seen many countries, but never heard of so cruel a law." "What do you mean, replied the king. "It is a common law. I shall be interred with the queen, my wife, if she'll die first." "But, sir," said I, "may I presume to ask your Majesty if strangers be obliged to observe this law?" "Without doubt," returned the king, "they are not exempted if they be married in this island." I returned home, much depressed by this answer, for the fear of my wife's dying first, and that I should be interred alive with her, occasioned me very uneasy reflections. But there was no remedy. I must have patience, and submit to the will of God. I trembled, however, at every little indisposition of my wife. And Allah! In a little time my fears were realized, for she fell sick and died. The king and all his court expressed their wish to honor the funeral with their presence, and the most considerable people of the city did the same. When all was ready for the ceremony, the corpse was put into a coffin with all her jewels and her most magnificent apparel. The procession began, and as second actor in this doleful tragedy, I went next the corpse, with my eyes full of tears, bewailing my deplorable fate. Before we reached the mountain, I made an attempt to affect the minds of the spectators. I addressed myself to the king first, and then to all those that were round me. Bowing before them to the earth, and kissing the border of their garments, I prayed them to have compassion upon me. "Consider," said I, "that I am a stranger, and ought not to be subject to this rigorous law, and that I have another wife and children in my own country. Although I spoke in the most pathetic manner, no one was moved by my address. On the contrary, they ridiculed my dread of death as cowardly, made haste to let my wife's corpse into the pit, and lowered me down the next moment in an open coffin with a vessel full of water and 7 loaves. As I approached the bottom, I discovered by the aid of the little light that came from above the nature of this subterranean place. It seemed an endless cavern, and might be about 50 fathoms deep. Instead of losing my courage and calling death to my assistance in that miserable condition, however, I felt still an inclination to live, and to do all I could to prolong my days. I went groping about for the bread and water that was in my coffin, and took some of it, though the darkness of the cave was so great that I could not distinguish day and night. Yet I always found my coffin again, and the cave seemed to be more spacious than it had appeared to be at first. I lived for some days upon my bread and water, which being all spent, I at last prepared for death. I was offering up my last devotions when I heard something tread, and breathing or panting as it walked. I advanced toward that side from whence I heard the noise, and on my approach, the creature puffed and blew harder, as if running away from me. I followed the noise, and the thing seemed to stop sometimes, but always fled and blew as I approached. I pursued it for a considerable time, till at last I perceived a light. Resembling a star, I went on, sometimes lost sight of it, but always found it again, and at last discovered that it came through a hole in the rock, large enough to admit a man. Upon this, I stopped some time to rest, being much fatigued with the rapidity of my progress afterward. Coming up to the hole, I got through, and found myself upon the seashore. I leave you to guess the excess of my joy. It was such that I could scarcely persuade myself that the hole was not a dream. But when I was recovered from my surprise, and convinced of the reality of my escape, I perceived what I had followed to be a creature which came out of the sea, and was accustomed to enter the cavern when the tides were high. I examined the mountain, and found it to be situated betwixt the sea and the town, but without any passage to or communication with the latter, the rocks on the seaside being high and perpendicularly steep. I prostrated myself on the shore to thank God for this mercy, and afterward entered the cave again to fetch bread and water, which I ate by daylight with a better appetite than I had done since my interment in the dark cavern. I returned thither a second time, and groped among the coffins for all the diamonds, rubies, pearls, gold bracelets, and rich stuffs I could find. These I brought to the shore, and tying them up neatly into bales, I laid them together upon the beach, waiting till some ship might appear. After 2 or 3 days, I perceived a ship just come out of the harbor, making for the place where I was. I made a sign with the linen of my turban, and called to the crew as loud as I could, "Tehardme," and sent a boat to bring me on board. When they asked by what misfortune I came thither, I told them that I had suffered shipwreck 2 days before, and made shift to get ashore with the goods they saw. It was fortunate for me that these people did not consider the place where I was, nor inquire into the probability of what I told them, but without hesitation took me on board. When I came to the ship, the captain was so well pleased to have saved me, and so much taken up with his own affairs, that he also took the story of my pretended shipwreck upon trust, and generously refused some jewels which I offered him. We passed by several islands, and among others that called the Isle of Bells, about 10 days' sail from Serendib, and 6 from that of Kella, where we landed. This island produces lead mines, Indian canes, an excellent camphire. The king of the Isle of Kella is very rich and powerful, and the Isle of Bells, which is about 2 days' journey in extent, is also subject to him. The inhabitants are so barbarous that they still eat human flesh. After we had finished our traffic in that island, we put to sea again, and touched at several other ports. At last I arrived happily at Baghdad with infinite riches. Out of gratitude to God for his mercies, I contributed liberally toward the support of several mosques and the subsistence of the poor, and gave myself up to the society of my kindred and friends, enjoying myself with them in festivities and amusements. Here Sinbad finished the relation of his 4th voyage. He made a new present of 100 sequins to whom he requested to return with the rest, next day at the same hour, to dine with him. And here the story of his 5th voyage. Sinbad and the other guests took their leave and retired.